Hello and welcome to Guidance Post. I am M. Everett K, your host, and today the title is Stop Holding Up the Ruins. And sometimes collapse doesn't announce itself, right? Sometimes things just stop moving. I imagined myself pushing a giant rock uphill. Yeah, I think a lot of life is pushing a rock uphill. But I imagine myself pushing it so long and then it just stops moving. There's no more momentum. I can't get it to go anywhere. Keep pushing and there's no help around, right? So it just stops. You're stuck. So instead of letting it go, I sit down underneath it and I use my body and my strength and my will and my energy to hold it in place. Like if this is as far as it's going to go, at least I'm going to sit here and hold it here until something breaks through, something else happens. So what is this rock? It's a relationship. It's a dream. It's the job. It's the version of the future you were building toward. But it stalls. There's no momentum, no evidence of progress. No real sign that it's becoming what you want it to, what you need it to. So instead of stepping back and away from it and letting gravity do its work, you do something strange. You do what I did. You sit down underneath it, and then you become that brace. You're the one that's holding it in place all by yourself. And you call that loyalty or faith or patience, or I still believe that this is going to work. There'll be a breakthrough any day now. I just need to hold on. I just need to have faith. I just need to be strong. But sometimes what looks like belief is just refusal of acceptance and refusal of the grief that comes after a collapse. There I am, standing in the middle of a collapsed structure, holding up two broken pieces of the rubble, one in each hand, right? Triumphant, with this ridiculous triumphant look on my face, like I'd accomplished something big and grand. Like everyone around me should be impressed at what I've accomplished, right? Rubble all around me, and I'm standing there with two pieces of the structure in my hands. But meanwhile, everyone around me could clearly see that the structure is gone, that it's collapsed, that it's been destroyed. The relationship was gone. The assumption was gone. My fantasy future was gone. That's what had collapsed. That's what I was standing in the middle of. But I'm still staying there holding up those two pieces. I still believe, as long as I still believe, it is possible. I will not let this fail. But it's funny, but it's also painfully accurate. At least it was for me. Because the old identity doesn't always preserve the entire fantasy. It preserves just enough fragments to avoid acknowledging the collapse and grieving the collapse. A memory here, a possibility there, a text message, an old picture, an old video, a moment when your future seemed real and obtainable, and it was right there. A version of the future that almost happened if reality had only cooperated with your wishes and desires. And we hold those pieces up like they're evidence, right? But they're not evidence that the dream is still alive. They're evidence that we haven't set it down yet, that we haven't acknowledged the collapse of it and moved on. Here's the principle that matters. Do not become a support beam for the collapsed future. And I've done that more times than I care to count. Because the fantasy doesn't always sustain itself, right? Sometimes we sustain it by explaining it, by replaying it, by defending it, by waiting for the rock to start rolling back uphill again, waiting for the destroyed structure to reassemble itself because we were devoted enough to stand in the rubble long enough to watch it happen. But devotion to a dead structure is not true alignment. And belief was never meant to function as emotional scaffolding around something that has already fallen and collapsed. There is a point where I still believe is no longer faith, and it's just resistance to your reality. I say this with love and respect because I have absolutely been the guy in the rubble more times, like I said, than I care to remember. My helmet crooked, dust all over everything, holding a half structural beam in one hand and an emotional support brick in the other, looking around like, hey, good news, everyone. Technically, this is still standing because I refuse to let it go. I will be the one to keep this thing going, right? But that's not manifestation. And that is not even spiritual commitment. That is a man with splinters, back pain, and a collapsed assumption pretending that he passed a grand test. Welcome to the floor. because eventually the rock does move, but not uphill like you want to. It rolls right over top of you and crushes you as it moves in the wrong direction, all because you refuse to step aside. And after the acknowledgement of the collapse, my realization was always the same. This was never going where I thought it was going. This was never going to work out how I wanted it to work out. This was never going to reach that end goal that I had planned, we had planned, they had planned, whatever. For whatever reasons, when it stalls, I knew that it was stalled, but I was too stubborn to leave. Because I was trying to force movement as something that had already stopped responding to my efforts, to my energy, to my will. And this is where the new identity enters, and this part really matters. The new self doesn't need to hate that rock. It doesn't need to curse the rubble. I don't need to be mad at the old relationship. I don't need to be mad at old jobs or careers or whatnot that didn't work out. Because this is also a genuine identity threshold for me, realizing that. Because the old self didn't stay under the rock out of stupidity or weakness. I didn't stay there in these relationships, in these jobs and stuff, trying to hold it up, trying to keep pushing forward out of stupidity or weakness or blindness. The old self stayed because leaving felt like self-betrayal or betrayal of the future, like abandoning my dream or the dream itself. So I stayed. And that's a trap that makes ruins so hard to put down. It wasn't just about the thing that I wanted. It was about staying true to what I felt and what I believed. That I'm devoted, that I don't quit, that I honor what I love, that I keep pushing, that I try and make things work to the best of my ability, even if I'm the only one trying. And the new self understands this difference. Leaving the rock is not abandoning the dream. It is refusing to be buried by it, by the wrong form of it. See, the dream was real. The love was real. The investment was real. The energy I put into it and my effort was real. What I wanted was real. What wasn't real was the idea that holding up its wreckage was the same thing as honoring it. So the new self doesn't perform loyalty by standing in the rubble and the debris. The new self simply tells the truth about the situation. This stopped moving, this has collapsed, and I am no longer available to hold up the remains. And that's not failure, that is true orientation. That is the moment where you stop confusing endurance with alignment. Because sometimes the next true move is not to push harder. Sometimes it is step out from behind the rock, let gravity answer, and notice what remains when the debris settles. And it's not the fantasy, it's not the fragments, it's you. You remain. The lesson can be integrated. When should I have stopped pushing? How come I was the only one pushing? You know, those things. Once you realize that, then you can integrate it into yourself. You know, the love can still be honored that you had. The effort that you put into it can be acknowledged. But the ruins don't need a caretaker. And you were never meant to be one. You were never meant to go back to all the painful things that have collapsed in your life and root around in the rubble searching for a clue of how, hey, like, here's the broken bolt. This is the one piece that failed and the whole thing collapsed. Maybe that is a lesson that you needed to learn, you know, why it collapsed or what you did or did not do to facilitate the collapse. But sometimes it's like you're only supposed to be in that situation to learn something. Maybe it was a small something, it was a large something, to get experience into something, to move on. Some of us aren't made to be in these places for a very long time. Sometimes it's a very short time. And then in my case, they were probably supposed to be a short time, and I pushed them into a long time. But again, there are lessons to be learned to integrate it and move forward. Don't get stuck in the rubble because it's not a warm, comfy place. You don't want to stay there. So next time you feel yourself holding up something that has clearly stopped moving, that's not working, ask yourself, am I building this or am I just bracing it? And that question alone will tell you a great deal. It will tell you if what you're doing is alive, if there is movement, if there's response. There'll be reciprocity, there'll be truth, and you will feel calm. You will feel good about the situation. You won't have anxiety. But if it's collapsed and it's stalled and it's not moving anywhere, there will be strain. There will be stalled waiting and anxiety. There'll be fantasy maintenance and loops in your head, and the feeling that everything depends on you not letting go. Like you have to be there to brace it. Otherwise, everything's going to collapse and it's going to be your fault, right? So just work the floor ladder steps. Number one, name the wobble and say it plainly. In this instance, I am bracing a stalled fantasy, and create the pause. I don't need to push, plead, prove, or preserve this right now because it has stalled. So more effort is not serving me. Then define the objective. Am I seeking movement, or am I just avoiding the acceptance of the collapse and the grief that follows? Because most of us will avoid grief at all costs, and rightfully so. And then it would be choose the next true move, which in this case is step out from behind the rock. Quit pushing, quit putting all your energy into this thing that you know has stalled, and move away from it. See if someone else steps in, so to speak. See if someone else's energy will start moving stuff forward in the relationship, in the job, or whatever. And this will kind of determine whether stepping out is just the first step of stepping away, you know. And then again, you release the expendable. And what's expendable here is the fantasy, the imagined future, the need for the rubble to become architecture again. And nothing's worse than hanging on to those two pieces, saying, I will rebuild this with my will and my confidence, even though what was in that building has moved on. What was under or above that structure, rather, and the structure collapsed, that's gone. So the collapse isn't just the structure itself, it's whatever was built on top of it as well, right? So faith should not require you to stand in the ruins pretending it's still a home. And belief should not cost you your body, your peace, and your new identity, holding up what gravity has already answered for you. Thank you for joining me. I am M. Everett K. This has been a guidance post. Encourage you to check out Lessons from the Floor, what I learned while flat on my back in a chocolate crime scene, if you'd like some more insight and teachings on these types of things. Until then, I will see you next time. Thank you.